Spoiler alert, I watched episode 6 of The Rings of Power on Amazon's streaming service Prime Video, and yes, you guessed it, a lot of freaking talking. Hi everyone, my name is Jacob Berry. Welcome to the StudioJake vidcast where I talk about all things pop culture. Be sure to like, share, subscribe, and if you're watching on YouTube, ring that little bell so you get notifications when I post a new vidcast, and consider becoming a channel member. Alright, so yeah, I watched episode 6 of Rings of Power. I don't know why I continue to torture myself. Actually, you know what I do? It's because I am a fan of Lord of the Rings. I've read The Lord of the Rings, The Hobbit, The Silmarillions, The Unfinished Tales, Beren and Luthien. I am a huge Middle-earth and Tolkien fan, and someone who I thought I respected said that I was engaging in clickbait whenever I do these reviews. I just want to address that real quick. No, I'm not. I am a fan of Tolkien, and as a fan, I am reviewing a poor adaptation of his work. If you disagree with my take, if you like The Rings of Power, so be it. I don't care. I'm just giving you my take, and people who I hope are like-minded don't have to engage with it. I do that because I'm a pop culture commentator. It's what I do. And if you don't like that, tough bananas. All right. So again, spoiler warnings. I'm getting into the episode summary like I do whenever I go over the episodes. All right, so we open with Buzzcut Elf Arendir, who is running through a forest, and he's trying to be like all sneaky, and he spots two orcs, but then, oh no, there's a third one. And, he quickly kills them because, he's empowered, I guess, and he quickly takes care of them. And then after he kills the last one, he goes, for some reason. Okay, whatever. And coincidentally, one of the orcs just happens to have a map to the directions of where the elf Blacksmith City is. Oh, what a coincidence. I wonder if he's going to ride in on a white horse and save everyone. Don't know, but So then we cut to the Blacksmith City. It has a name, I don't care. And you see Celebrimbor, who's the jewelry smith. He's very angry about things because no matter what he does, the 9 rings of men can't seem to come together, and he is acting very angsty and angry, and he can't remember the name of one of the smiths, the blonde chick who, had a heart-to-heart with, not Sauron in the previous episode. So then Enitar, who, of course is actually Sauron, he interrupts him and then gaslights him about what's going on, and he tells him that the elves in the city are demanding an audience with him, but Celebrimbor is like, no, you just handle it. Oh, and by the way, go see why the dwarves are late with our shipment of mithril. Anatar, he goes out and does this, and he's like, hey everybody, so what's up? Celebrimbor's busy. But then he is shown the body of a dead elf, which has like orc scribblings on it, and this reveals that their city could potentially be under attack. So he tells the guard elf to bury it and not to tell anyone, even though they laid him out plainly in the square outside the blacksmith. So yeah, it's very obvious. So anyway, one of the elves who sees this, because like I said, it's out in the city where everyone could, she asks, what do those scribblings mean? And he replies, where is he? All dramatically. So then we cut to Adar, and he's having a meal with Galadriel. He's preparing for the siege of the Elven City, and they talk about their fifis about Sauron, and Adar makes this comment, it's not his lies that have to be snuffed out, it's Sauron himself. And Galadriel calls him an orc, and he gets mad that she misgendered him and corrects her, and he's like, I'm a Yerick. So then he shows her Morgoth's crown, and he does the whole thing about how he used it to destroy Sauron. We saw that at the beginning of the at the beginning of the second season, this season. Let me just tell you something. This whole conversation between Galadriel and Adar is written like it was written by the head of a teenage drama club. It's very poorly written. They talk like this for some reason, and like all dramatically, and it doesn't actually mean anything. They just talk about their fifis regarding Sauron, and it's just like, okay, we get it. Adar says that he used the crown of Morgoth once to destroy Sauron, and he thinks that, they can work together to do it. And let me just say, Adar makes this stunning revelation. So remember in a previous episode, I mentioned how when Sauron was still pretending to be Halbrand, he convinces Adar to let him go so he can go find Sauron or whatever, even though he himself was Sauron, and Adar lets him go. Adar then reveals to Galadriel that he knew the whole time that Halbrand was Sauron. Why didn't he, throw him in that volcano, the one that was started by a geyser? Why didn't he just do that? Why didn't he stab him again with the crown of Morgoth? Why didn't he do any of that? So to me, this just shows how insanely stupid these characters are, how poorly they're written, how creatively bankrupt the writers of this show are. Anyway, so he cuffs Galadriel, and then that ends that scene. So then we go back to Numenor, and Elendil is on trial, and he is asked to renounce his crime. It's to say, hey, the cousin is actually the king, but he refuses. And his daughter gets stank face because she sided with the cousin king. And so they decide to do like this old school test where they let the Valor decide if he's innocent or guilty. Then we cut to Tom Bombadil and not Gandalf, the stranger. And they're just sitting in front of a fire, and the stranger has this sort of fiery vision about the not hobbits, Nori and Poppy. Oh, speaking of which, we immediately cut to them with no transition whatsoever. And she's having a heart to heart with the leader of the other not hobbits that they discovered. And she says, hey, why don't you just leave this place because the Dark Wizard is here and his thugs are around. And she's like, this is our home. We're not going anywhere. And then we see Poppy is flirting with the crazy haired not hobbit from 2 episodes ago. And they end up kiss. And Nori's not happy about this, but they decide to stay and try to help these other not hobbits get free from the Dark Wizard's thug. Remember, this guy's a wizard, and he's got tall men who can probably one of them can take out 10 of these not hobbits, but they decide that they're going to help them. So then we cut to old Tom, and he tells not Gandalf it's time for him to have his staff, and they're kind of in front of this. It looks like a dead forest, like there's all these dead trees, it looks like to me. And he says, you have to go down there and you have to get your staff. The Dark Wizard found his staff here. This is where you'll find yours. And the stranger's like, well, no, I have to go save Nori and Poppy. Can't I go do that and then come back? And old Tom is like, no, your road is split here. You either go this and fulfill your destiny of defeating Sauron in the west and keeping in check the Dark Wizard to the east. So you either have to save them or do this. So he says, it's your friends or your destiny. Which is it? I have a feeling that this is going to be some sort of test where not Gandalf is going to go save the not hobbits and then come back. Now, it could be wrong. It could be he chooses to get his staff. That would actually be good writing, which is why I'm not really anticipating it, but we'll see. So then we cut back to the dwarves, and King Durin III is hoarding all the gold and jewels that they're finding in the mine. Durin IV, his son, comes to see him and is like, did you summon me, father? And he's like, no, he did. And it's, of course, not Sauron, or Sauron in his elf form. And he says, hey, listen, we're low on mithril. We need some. Can you help us? We're about to be attacked. Durin IV is like, no, I don't trust this guy. Don't do this, father. And so the king turns Anatar away, but as he's turned away, he senses the Balrog's presence in the mine. Now remember, this has been teased since season 1, and they've only had one other hint that there's a dark evil in the mine. So now we finally have another glimpse. What? Whenever not Sauron leaves, during the fourth is like, hey, oh, thank goodness, I thought you had lost all your senses. And during the third is like, oh, no, I'm just waiting for a bigger trade deal. So then during the fourth is like, take off the ring, father, it's possessed you. And he's like, get away from me, son, I'm not taking it off. Well, then, of course, he goes to see Disa, who, of course, woman-splains the situation to him, even though, he literally just spoke with his father. And she's like, hey, we have to challenge him. And he's like, no, I'm not going to do that. I still see my father in his eyes. He's just far away. We just have to figure out something else. And then, of course, he cries. This is a dwarf. They're known for their toughness, their grittiness, their stoicism. Yeah, just exactly what Tolkien envisioned. A crying dwarf who gets emotional in front of his wife. And then, of course, they have another heart-to-heart. Oh my gosh, so many freaking heart-to-hearts in this show. We cut to Elendil. He is informed by his traitor's daughter. Remember, the daughter sided with the cousin king. She comes in and says he's going to have a trial by sea where they're going to toss him into the ocean. A sea creature is going to come and going to decide his fate. And then she has the gall to cry and moan. Now remember, he's in this situation because of her. She betrayed the faithful, the people loyal to the Queen Regent, who again is not a character in the books. And she sided with the cousin over them. She got her friend killed over the whole shrine incident. And now she's crying and has the gall to try to emotionally manipulate her father. And by the way, this scene just reeks of disgust to me, because Elendil, who's supposed to be this big, strong warrior who eventually becomes the king of men, he is slouched. Remember in the episode with the shrine, they did this thing where as he's watching his men in a fight, a guard is literally just holding him by his shoulders. He's like, "No, get off me, no, no." And now he's slumped in front of his daughter as the camera makes her seem taller than him. Yeah, it's not lost. The symbolism of that scene is not lost on me. Well, he finally stands up, not to stand up to his daughter, but they bring the Queen Regent in, Muriel, I think her name is, she's blind because a volcano made her blind somehow. She begs him to surrender to the king. Oh, and guess what? We have another heart to heart about how he, talks about courage and all this and whatnot. So then we see some dwarves about to go into the mine to do some work, and Disa's there for some reason, and she won't move to let the miners in, so they say we're going to remove her. She does that weird sing scream thing that she does and flicks her robe, and then a swarm of bats attacks the miners, and her husband during the fourth are like, "Oh yeah, that'll work, but they'll be back." And he goes, "Well, we have work to do." Again, dwarves frightened by a bunch of bats. We had an emotionally wrecked dwarf in a previous scene, and now we have a bunch of dwarves scared off by a bunch of tiny bats. Again, just what Tolkien emphasized. And for those of you listening, I'm being incredibly sarcastic. So we go back to Elendil. He's about to face the sea creature. Oh, and what happens? The Queen Regent decides to save her manzel in distress, and she says, "I'm going to do the trial because I'm the reason that he is being tried for treason, so I'm going to do it." And the cousin king is like super excited about this, right? Because he's like, "Oh, well, if the sea creature eats her, then I'm definitely the king because there's no one else." She goes into this pool thing, and by the way, they take forever for her to walk down to this pool. What should have been a 2-second scene takes like 30 seconds. And because you don't really like this character, you're kind of rooting for the sea monster. But anyway, she gets in, and a giant shrimp shows up. That's what it looked like. It was like this giant shrimp looking sea creature shows up and kind of roars at her. And then, of course, she emerges, oh, so predictable. And so then this Queen Regent, who isn't even a character in the book, she's declared innocent. And of course, the Cousin King isn't happy about this, especially when everyone starts cheering for her and they start calling her the Queen of the Sea. So he goes to the Palantir and has a vision of Halbrand. Again, this is not what the Palantir was used for. Oh my gosh. So, and also in the vision, Halbrand appears. Now remember, not his new elf form. Halbrand appears to him. So weird. So then we cut back to Galadriel, who has decided to snitch to Adar and says, "Yes, Sauron is back. Let's use the 3 rings of the elves and the crown of Morgoth to finish him off completely." Adar says, "Well, I don't think you're actually going to hold up your end of the bargain." Now remember, this was his idea. So he was the one who proposed an alliance. And then when she's like, "Okay, yeah, let's do it," he's like, nah, I changed my mind. Of course, this would be normal for an orc or a Uric in this case. I don't want to misgender him like Galadriel did earlier. Normally, this would be fine, but because they're making such a big deal about trying to humanize the orcs, it didn't make any sense. Why now would he decide to change his mind, even though it was his plan to begin with? So, anyway, so many inconsistencies in this story. He reveals to her that he has summoned a legion of orcs and then more legions of orcs. And now she feels bad. Galadriel feels so bad. Oh. He locks her up as she's being taken away. She's like, "You're falling into Sauron's plan. He didn't have an army, and now you've brought him an army." And he just kind of waves her off, blows an orc horn, and then we see Anatar, who cuts his hand for some reason. We're not explaining the significance of that. He just kind of does it. So then we see Celebrimbor. He hears the ruckus in the city, and just before he decides to take charge, he's intercepted by Sauron, who uses a spell on him to convince him everything is fine. So remember, beginning of the season, Sauron was stabbed by the crown of Morgoth, right? And then beaten by Adar and the other orcs. And he got turned into the Venom symbiote, apparently. And then turned into Halbrand, and now this elf form. He's powerful enough to create an illusion that convinces Celebrimbor that everything in the city is fine. They're not under siege. He just needs to finish the Rings of Men. He also gives him some mithril, which I'm assuming he stole from the dwarf mine. Of course, they never actually showed this because they're creatively bankrupt and don't know actually how to tell a story, and he just happens to have it and gives it to him. Now, I have a feeling this will turn out to be infected metal of some kind. But anyway, how then is he able to convince the leader of this elf city, one of the greatest of their craftsmen, that the city is fine? Now, remember, in the Silmarillion, in Lord of the Rings, in The Hobbit, they make it clear that Sauron is so powerful. One time he was under attack, he snaps his fingers, essentially, and sets off a volcano that kills all of his attackers. And yet, in this show, they establish that he's weak enough that a simple stab of Morgoth's crown, which they never establish as a powerful item, they just expect you as the watcher to identify it as such because of whatever, but they never say this is a thing that can hurt him or whatever. They just do it. But now he's powerful enough to create this illusion and gaslight Celebrimbor even further. It makes no sense. So then he takes charge of the city, and the illusion fades, and we see all the panicking. Why are the elves panicking? Okay, they are strong, immortal. They can, or I should say, they're amortal. They don't age. They can be killed by steel, fire, and wood, according to Middle Earth lore, if I recall correctly. Oh, and also I think they can die, like if their spouse dies. They can be overcome with grief. But here we are, seeing them freak out over a orc invasion, something many of them have faced in the first stage, but they're freaking out about it. They're not lining up. They're not the brave, stoic warriors from the Two Towers. Oh no, they're not that. They're freaking out and panicking. Yeah, just what Tolkien envisioned. We've established that Galadriel, aka Galadriel, is the only elf with courage. So the orcs begin their siege by setting rocks on fire. I mean, literally, they don't show them pouring like any kind of oil. They don't establish that it's firestone. They just set rocks on fire and then fire the catapults, and that's how the episode ends. Once again, this episode, it was almost an hour long. It could have been 30 minutes if they have just shortened all the dialogue. That's right. This is one of the most poorly written, creatively bankrupt series I have ever watched. It has gotten me so upset that this is what people will think is Tolkien. Now, there's 2 episodes left in this show. How are they going to wrap all this up? The Stranger and the Not Hobbits, they're not even connected to what's going on. Isildur was basically forgotten after he escaped from being swallowed whole by a giant worm that had teeth. That's my assessment of this episode. One thing that did surprise me is how Galadriel was sidelined. She was sidelined totally in this episode. You know, in season 1, she's built up as this warrior elf, even though in the books, they make it clear she was only in one battle the entire length of the Middle-earth saga. Just one. But no, she's a warrior who's motivated by the death of her brother and her husband, whom she only mentions once in the whole show. We know she's a widow, even though in the books she's married very happily, and she uses her wisdom, her grace, her poise, her winsome to get the elves through trying times, through the shadows. And this show, she's basically a dude. She's sarcastic, she's rude, she's self-righteous, she's always on her high horse. And then this season tried to humble her a little bit. But when you look back, she started everything. She brought Halbrand, Sauron, to Middle-earth. She told Adar, she snitched on her kind, and basically gave Adar all the information that he needed. But yeah, probably in the upcoming episode or the one after, she's going to do this great escape because that's what she does, and her and Arondir are going to all save the day. But with all these story arcs, all these plot lines, They're not interconnected. They're not woven. They're not subtle. They're not smart. They're not clever. It's poorly written fan fiction. Don't waste your time. Don't waste it on this poor parody of the great classical writer J.R.R. Tolkien. If you like that video, be sure to give it a like, share it to all your friends, tell them what you thought about it, and of course, subscribe. Leave me a comment. If you're watching on YouTube, ring that little bell so that you get notifications when I post a new vidcast, and consider becoming a channel member where you get all kinds of exclusive perks. If you don't want to support me on big tech, I don't blame you. Click on the link to my locals community. It's in the description of the video. You can send me tips, or you can become a monthly subscriber. It really helps out small indie creators like myself. Or you can purchase one of my 4 novels on Amazon. These 3 are available on barnesandnoble.com as well. Blessed Child is available exclusively on Amazon, and I guarantee you it won't have any of this woke nonsense, nonstop talking that we have in Rings of Power. Once again, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time, right here on Studio Jake. I've been living life right like I could just die anymore.